You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering Finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabalcast, where we are yet again holding ourselves accountable. So we now do our hype previews over on Patreon. Feel free to sign up. And we do our reviews, so throwing it back to what we said before the set here on the cast. So with that, we are doing Tarkir Dragonstorm, which disappointingly did not have Dragonstorm in the set. So with that, let's take it away.
So to start off, my overhyped cards, I had two of them. Basically for the same reason. They were Mox Jasper and Ugin Eye of the Storm. They were pre-ordering for $60 and $80 respectively, and they are $14 and $34 respectively. So I think we hit that nail on the head. And as expected, both cards have been overshadowed, and they have been overshadowed by at least Corey Steelcutter in both Standard and Modern. Neither seems to have any kind of buzz in Commander. Baator, Teval, and the entire Abzan Precon seem to have more of a shine at the moment than either Mox Jasper or Ugin Eye of the Storm. Now, where Ugin lands in Modern is yet to be seen, as the Eldrazi decks don't need Ugin, and traditional Tron is kind of dead at the moment. As far as Commander is concerned, we see Ugin in the expected Eldrazi and colorless list, where Glaring Fleshraker is the top card, again, as predicted, and Mystic Forge and Sensei's Divining Top pair up to combo kill the table as well. But as I mentioned in this preview episode, you don't need Ugin to do that. Glaring Fleshraker, Sensei's Divining Top, and Mystic Forge is infinite mana, infinite damage. That's it. Well, it's not infinite mana, just keep paying for the top, but it's infinite damage, so you take the table out. You don't need Ugin. Ugin is the card that just gets you picked up from the table and put in the garbage because you've exiled everybody's board and they don't want to deal with you anymore. So all in all, these two cards fell flat as anticipated, but I do think people aren't playing Ugin in the most efficient shells in Commander yet, so there's room for growth still on that card, but I do think Jasper is just as anticipated and as expected, and as everybody was yelling, just dead on arrival.
Yeah, Ugin is one that I thought was going to take quite a bit of time in order for people to actually figure out where it should be played.
Yep.
Because most of the hype surrounding it when it first came out was like in Eldrazi lists. Like, I don't really think it goes there because like there's other things I want to be doing in those decks. And I think you're right. We haven't really figured out a spot for Eugene to kind of fall into. And I think that price point, was just like untenable to that point. By contrast, I had Call the Spirit Dragons, which I called, quote, higher than me after buying a full ounce on discount.
Accurate.
Boy, did this card come down. At the time, I think it was like 30 to 40 market, and we are sitting at about sub $2 now. I said that the card, it deals with dragons, and it wins you the game if you activate it enough times. It just doesn't do enough besides that. Like, it was all hype, and I'm glad I was right, frankly. Paying Wooburg for something that basically just makes a creature type indestructible and makes them bigger doesn't feel really good. And that's, I guess, what people realized. I'd rather just have Coalition Victory and just win if I'm required to untap with this thing in order to have it win me the game. That's way easier to meet those conditions than it is to have 5 dragons of different colors, or 5 colors of dragons on the board. That's not great. But hey, glad I was right.
I don't have a lot to say about this just now because I had it ranked differently for this set, so we'll have that conversation in a little bit. So we're just gonna
same with Mox Jasper.
So we're just gonna steamroll straight to my underhyped, and I had Craterhoof Behemoth as my underhyped. It was $20 at pre-release. It's $13 now. And aside from an anomalous day where it sold 100 copies, which was May 16th, this is seeing over 20 copies move per day, and the average quantity per order is 1, so we are seeing Commander players move in. I'm not quite sure how to read this, though, as there was the expected price drop. There are a ton on the market, so it'll take time to rebound in terms of price. And according to rec data, as a reprint in the set, this is way behind the other reprints in the set in terms of popularity. So I'm going to take the L on this one because it's behind Sun Titan in terms of play population, but the importance of the reprints cannot be understated. And there are players that got the message of, hey, you should be entering combat to end the game. And they got that message loud and clear. So that's what I expected. That's what I talked about in the episode. So I'm glad to see that happening. But the fact that it didn't happen with the fervor that I expected because of the reprint and thus the drop in price is why I'm going to take the L on this one.
Yeah, I think the running theme of the past few of these hype previews and reviews has been that there is no such thing as too low. And that was same with me. I thought Rally the Monastery at, I think it was $1-ish, was too low because I could see it being a $3 to $5 uncommon and standard, and it's sitting at a nickel. So I similarly just missed it. It still does everything.
Yep.
Literally everything I could want. It makes monks with prowess. It untaps stuff. It does reprisal for 2 mana if you've cast another spell this turn, or for 4. And I think maybe that's where I was wrong, was that the mana cost is kind of prohibitive, or just, the metas realistically don't care about this card. Because to me, for 4 mana, I can also get Blessed Reverse, or what is it, the 2 mana kicker to choose one of the other modes from Theros Reborn. I don't remember, but it's a better removal spell for 4 mana than this is. And I think that's basically where it comes in. If this said choose 2, we're talking about it completely differently.
Yeah, so I have a couple things to say about this card. I just want to look at... Okay, so when we were talking about this, I think I might have mentioned Elspeth's Smite. 1 white instant, deals 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead, right? So we have that to compete with. That was a standard card when Mono Red was the deck to play, basically at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025. And now we have Corey Steelcutter, and people are playing Slick Shot Show Off. And Show Off can grow to absurd sizes, but it still dies to Elspeth's Smite. However, Rally the Monastery can also deal with it, or any of the other prowess creatures, or even non-prowess creatures like Hearth Elemental and Tolarian Terror that are inside that deck. It can take care of Abhorrent Oculus. It can take care of any of the demons inside the demon deck. Right now, I think the problem with this card is that while Plains is... or at least the white mana symbol is the most powerful thing to be doing in Standard, Rally the Monastery is a difficult card to play because any of the decks that want to make a white mana don't necessarily want to be casting multiple spells on their opponent's turn. They want to be doing it on their turn. And one of the spells they're going to want to be casting is Temporary Lockdown, which gets all the cards from the major aggressive decks. And you are, sometimes you're the one casting Abhorrent Oculus. Sometimes you're just casting Day of Judgment. So there are a lot of other removal spells in this space. And at this point in time, if we're going to see Rally the Monastery kind of pick up, it might be an iterative design on the Steelcutter deck, which could also then kind of turn into this weird little inbred thing where you're now playing Rally as the answer to the mirror. Because it also makes monks with prowess, which is what Steelcutter does. And Steelcutter wants you to cast 2 spells in a turn.
Yep.
Right? So just for the flurry trigger. So if you just cast Burst Lightning and then Rally the Monastery, you've triggered Steelcutter, you've made 2 monks with prowess, and then you can keep going or what have you. I still think there's room for this card where the meta ended up after Dragonstorm, and what we're seeing does make sense as to why this deck this card didn't really pick up. And there still is opportunity for this in Standard as the meta evolves. But yeah, between then and now, it's definitely an L for this one, sadly.
Yeah, and I think it also could just be timeline more than anything for a lot of our too low picks. Is, print runs are as high as they are, opening rates are as high as they are, so it may take a little bit longer, less of the traditional window.
Yep. And like I said, I think there was just an amount of standard rotation that needed to happen, and standard did rotate, which is fantastic, but it rotated in a way that didn't really work for this card. Like, all of a sudden, the Abhorrent Oculus deck and Omniscience combo came out of nowhere. When we thought we were going to be playing against Overlords all day long, this card made so much more sense, right?
Yeah.
So
for sure.
all that has to happen is that the tenor of standard changes enough where this card is extremely relevant. Maybe the Steel Cutter deck goes 3 colors because it'll be really easy or really obvious, and this becomes a player in the space again. But it is definitely something worth keeping our eyes on, just like we looked at like Rip Apart and all these other things, the old mortal spells that had the opportunity to be really good in standard if things broke our way. Right.
Indeed.
So for me, my just right call out, as mentioned before, is Call the Spear Dragons. So we already went over, this was a $25 card. It's now a $2 card. As expected again, we are seeing Call the Spear Dragons played almost entirely in Dragons decks. But if you look hard enough, you can see the Morphon, Joda, etc. builds in the kind of soup of cards that people are playing according to Rec. Maskwood Nexus is one of the most played utility artifacts. A call out I made in our hype episode was that you would see this played in just tokens decks in general. What we're not seeing yet is the full lean into Conspiracy or Xenograph, where you're just hard naming dragons with these cards. People are just using Maskwood Nexus. I think when we see those two cards come up as not top cards, but some of the most played enchantments in the deck, that's where we're going to see people really meaning to play this card outside of dedicated Dragons lists. So I'm actually going to take this as a break even, as people are taking the alternative lines that I suggested, but we aren't seeing the full lean in yet. I do expect we'll get there though, and it could be when we get a critical mass of changelings over time, and then the ley line of the guild pack just kind of ties the room together for this card. Yeah. But the fact that the alternate lines and alternate methods of play didn't entirely die out is why I'm just kind of, like I said, I'm going to take, from a hype perspective, I'll take this one as a break even. From a dollar reduced standpoint, I'm pretty sure we were both on the same "it can't be this way forever" train.
We definitely were.
Right. So for your just right.
My just right, and again, boy was I wrong, Mox Jasper. So at the time we recorded the episode, I believe low on the card was around 30, which I said was, I thought, what would be just right. And I cited that it was more of a long-term thing, obviously, but I am going to full-on take the L. We're down to $10. It's 0 mana. It adds 1 mana of any color, only if you control a dragon. I think the cheapest dragon is still Dragon Whelp, or maybe there's the one from Guild Pack that's 2 mana, but I can't remember if that was a Drake or a dragon. So this doesn't even get online until turn 3. $10 might be a stretch long-term. Not going to lie.
Yeah.
As much as dragons are such a popular tribe, as much as this is obviously fast mana for those decks, I just don't see it coming along in EDH. I don't even think if it wasn't legendary, it would work in 60-card formats, because those decks just don't. Nobody plays dragons anymore. We're gone are the days of Tarkir, OG, where we had Jeskai Dragon control. Mm-hmm. We're not going back there. And I was completely wrong. And I will admit that even when I said it's going to take a while for it to get back here, but I think long term this is the right price, I was dead wrong. This should be a $10 card pretty much for the next indefinite futurity. As long as Magic is around. I don't ever see this card getting to, $20, $30. It's just not going to happen. It's not good enough. It's not relevant enough in a tribe that's fast enough for this mana to make a difference.
Yeah.
It's a tribe that exists on 5 and 6 mana, and getting to that on turn 4 isn't that great. It's not like dropping Mox Diamond, Soul Ring, Mana Crypt when we could do that and being like, oh, I can cast literally anything in my deck on turn 1. Dragon decks don't do that. And that's where I really got it wrong, is thinking in terms of the deck that I said it would go in, doesn't really care about fast mana. So this doesn't really do anything for that deck. And that's why I was wrong about the price being just right.
Yeah. I think if the price does change meaningfully, it will change meaningfully for the same reason that Call the Spirit Dragons is, which is one of the last things I said, which is just when we hit a critical mass of changelings.
Yep.
Because that's what people were looking at originally. Was there's the one black mana changeling that can't be blocked and can't block. I think there's
the white one has vigilance and lifelink, I think, or something like that.
I think there's that might be a 1-drop or a 2-drop. There's like a couple more low mana value changelings, and then you get into things,
Mirror Entity, but that doesn't care about winning with Call the Spirit Dragons. That cares about aggro.
Correct, but what Mirror Entity has in common with things like Taurian Mauler and the other changelings is they start to cost 5 and 6. And now you're just getting into exactly the same place that the Dragon's deck was in, or is in, where you've lost really the ideal timing to be using this card, which is in the first few turns of the game. And if you can't land enough cards with the creature type Dragon before you land Mox Jasper, then it's just going to sit there and do nothing. It's like drawing a late game Sol Ring. Doesn't do a whole lot. So
turn 10.
Yeah, exactly. So until we get that critical mass of changelings, I don't think this card's going to go up in value, similar to Call the Spirit Dragons.
Yeah.
All right. So that was a pretty quick run through. So time for picks.
Yes.
All right. I want you to go first.
Yes. So I am picking an interesting card for an interesting reason. I am going to the EDH well, which I typically avoid, and I am choosing Inala Archmage Ritualist. The oft overshadowed by Jalava and Kess and all of the other Grixis generals that are pretty good. And it is Grixis in 2 for a 4/5 that has Eminence. So Oloro was the Bay from this deck era. As well as
Arabo.
And Sorin. Whenever another non-token wizard enters the battlefield under your control, if a Nala Archmage Ritualist is in the command zone or the battlefield, pay 1 colorless, get a token of that wizard, it gains haste, exile it, end step, that jazz. And then tap 5 untapped wizards you control, target player loses 7 life. This one's kind of interesting. So I have been keeping my eye on some of the lower or less popular tribal commanders just to see what's going on with them when they start to see a little bit of a bump. And this one was interesting because this had been an average of 1 to 3 copies a day that it had been selling. After Kuja got spoiled on the 13th, all of a sudden every single day is double-digit copies of this card moving. And the really interesting thing is the price hasn't moved with it. So we have some kind of velocity here, presumably because of the number of wizards that are in Final Fantasy, combined with the fact that Kuja is the non-blue elements of Grixis, being black and red. So, okay, we kind of see why this is happening now. The long-term thing that makes me love this is it is basically the only Grixis dedicated wizard tribal general. Jaleva, it casts spells, which wizards do. Casts spells, which wizards do. But this is the only actual, I want wizards on the field because I want to start shotgunning people type of commander. So now we have high liquidity on this card. We have price inelasticity on this card. So there seem to be a number of reasons that we should be moving into this. And this is the kind of card that has been sitting in binders, bulk boxes, everything forever at, stores that do your $1 to $3. Obviously, that's the thing. But it is something that I think in the short to midterm, if this liquidity continues, we'll see $20 copies of this card in no time. Right now, you have to go to page 9 of 10 in order to see $10. There are 93 listings left, which at this rate, in about 10 days from date of recording, will be sold out of this card. I don't think it's going to sell out that fast, but hey, it might. And in the meantime, there is every reason to believe that this is an opportunity for us to move in on something which has a clear correlation to why it's happening, but also just has the long-term benefit of just being the only thing that does this thing.
Yeah.
It's the only tribal wizard guy in Grixis, and those are the wizard colors. So I think it's a good shot.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, I like this as well because there's a lot you can do with the Eminence ability. So I have seen one of my locals play this as their commander for a CEDH deck, and they basically play a Spell Seeker combo. And they just clone Spell Seeker, and that's it. You just tutor up 2 cards and kind of win from there. If you had to do something goofy, you can clone Thassa's Oracle or what have you if somebody was going to thought they'd be able to remove the first one. If you clone it, well, now there's 2 that are going to trigger, so etc. I like this because it's kind like you said, it's the only really dedicated wizard commander right now, especially one extended to these colors. It is one of the only Grixis commanders that doesn't want to do just generic Grixis things either.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of lends itself to more unique play patterns. And the moment this pops up on stocks and people are reminded of this card, it also seems like that's the opportunity for it to run away. So getting in early, either as a finance vehicle or as somebody who thinks they might want to play this card in regular and casual commander or in CEDH, this is also a fine time to do that as well. Otherwise, I think everything else you said was spot on.
Thank you.
Well, no problem.
What you got?
And then to continue our wizard theming, I am looking at Flame of Anor this week. So this is an instant from Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth. It costs 1 red and a blue. And it says choose 1. If you control a wizard as you cast a spell, you may choose 2 instead. And the 3 modes are target player draws 2 cards, destroy target artifact, or Flame of Anor deals 5 damage to target creature. So again, we're kind of leaning in on Wizard Tribal. I added this to my list in February of 2024. CK was buying 83 at $4.20. They didn't have any for sale. And there are 253 listings on TCG Player for a market of $4.91 because we basically just kind of come out of Lord of the Rings winter or summer and everything was still wicked high. Yeah. As of taking my notes, Card Kingdom was buying 162 at $3 a piece. They are now buying 114, but still at $3 a piece. And they have 10 for sale at $6 a piece. There are approximately 451 listings on TCG Player. When I was taking my notes, the market was $2.46. The market has gone up to $2.63. So we're kind of seeing this upward trajectory of this card still after the initial flood into the market. And after the banning of Underworld Breach in Modern, which was the card that kind of made Flame of Anor good in Modern. Kind of. Yeah. Now, when we look at this from a commander standpoint, we actually can see the same thing in Modern, where you play Flame of Anor alongside a critical mass of wizards. So, wizard tribal in both formats, basically. Breaking it down a little more, in Commander and Modern, prior to the spoiling of Vivi and after Flame of Anor plays as a modal control card that can pretty cleanly answer any kind of destructible artifact, creature, or can refill your hand. Everything about the spell is on the card. It's not really tricky to parse out. Yep. You got it. Most of the commander decks we see this in are helmed by creatures of the wizard type, ensuring that you have your critical mass and can thus choose multiple modes. There's no real great theme to what they are all doing just based on the analysis of Flame of Anor, which I think is great because it speaks to the utilitarian nature of the card and how it's purely agnostic and just a good card to have in the shell. It kind of sits in this bucket of like cards you have to play to make the deck work, and I think that's great because, again, like we talked about with Anala, Grixis does Grixis things, and Anala just does wizard things. And that's kind of what we see when we look at Flame of Anor, which is just wizard decks doing wizard things. What are those? It could be anything from throwing wizards at spells to counter them, to just playing like the secret mode on Anala, which is tapping some number of them to draw or mill or whatever. People are just doing things with wizard creatures. In Modern, the use of the card is virtually the same, though the location of the card in the 75 at the moment is a bit in flux. During the Breach era, a few months back, it could be in the main or the board, depending on what you expected to see that weekend. But now it seems to be a pure sideboard option. Though it seems people are getting ready for Vivi, and we're seeing Grixis Wizards start to form, there's also the possibility for an Izzet Spellslinger deck built a bit like the Corey Steelcutter deck, but with a Vivi win con. And we need those builds to kind of finish percolating before we really know what's going on. And what we're going to bring up now is a tweet from Pi Ganti, a very popular modern streamer. This is kind of a Grixis control list. We see Ragavan, we see Psychic Frog, we see Bowmasters, we see Tamios, and then we see Flame of Anor. And the only wizards in this deck are Tamio and Snapcaster Mage.
Yep.
Seven total wizards, and we're seeing Flame of Anor in Modern already in that test. Once we refine things down a little bit and we figure out where Vivi is going to go in the format, I expect Flame of Anor to slide in directly with Vivi. So, all in all, this is a card that scales well into the late game because there really aren't any limitations to the effects. 5 damage to a creature is a virtual Doomblade, so this just falls into the suite of spells for the Wizards or Vivi decks and Commander with a big and little c. It has a pedigree in Modern already, and only looks to be getting more support with a brand new card. The audience for it is pretty vast, and it plays up and down the competitive spectrum, which means we're not really pigeonholing ourselves with our audience. Yeah. So you talked about Anala, and what was the name of the card that was spoiled? Kuja. So Kuja is a Rakdos wizard. So again, you just slide this into the Grixis shell. And all the wizard cards in Final Fantasy seem to have this little ting ability, including the get a job card that makes a wizard. Yep. So when you cast Flame of Anor, not only can you ting with the wizard ability, you can then draw 2 more cards, which could then be 2 more spells, plus whatever other mode you want. It really does kind of fit into the idea of, I'm a spell slinger. Here are all my wizards. We're going to do wizardy things. Let's roll up our sleeves and get to work.
Yeah. Also, card goes really well with Snapcaster.
100%. Cast is another option for a commander for this because it casts spells out of the graveyard. So Anala, great. Cast, great because the flashback on it. Like that kind of utilitarian aspect is what you see when you look at the popular commanders for Flame of Anor on Rec. What are we doing? Wizard things. What are they? Don't know, but we got our tall hats and big sleeves on, right? When it comes to the timeline on this card, there are 715 total copies on TCG Player as of me taking my notes earlier in the week. It took me until page 5 to find a copy that was near $4. There was a vendor there that had 12 near mint copies for $3.74 with $2 shipping. Everybody prior to page 5 had like 4 or 6 copies. 12 was the first standout number. On page 7, the vendor Spellfinder had 6 LP copies at $4.36 with $1.31 shipping, so that makes it a $6 card. On page 8, they also had 45 near mint copies at $5. No shipping, which means they're cheaper than the LP copies when the math is done if you're buying like 1 or 2. And also on page 8, there were 16 near mint foil copies for $9.50 and 12 LP copies at $7.50. So it takes a really long time for this card to kind of get moving. This has had steady demand from modern players prior to the Vivi spoil, but with its increasing success in Modern and the spoiling of Vivi, it started to sell through 28 copies a day. Now, I don't expect demand to maintain long-term unless it becomes a pillar of a Vivi deck in Commander or the Spellslinger deck picks this up in Modern. But if we get in now at $4 or less, we can start flipping this within a few weeks for a small bit of profit. It'll probably take like 2 months before we can actually start to see some really decent numbers on this because we got to work all the way to page 5, like I said, which is 60, that's 120, that's 200, it's 270, it's like almost 300 copies. So it's like 3 weeks to like a month and a half before we can actually start making really decent money on this. Buy list, we're also moving when I was taking my notes. And if we can find a brick for $3 or less, we can start flipping to buy list pretty quickly as well. And that still holds true. If you can get in for 3, that's what Card Kingdom's buying them at. If you get in under 4, you can make like a little bit of, you can call it whatever you want, in credit, a little bit of profit in credit. So there is arbitrage opportunity. And buy lists are still open for this card right now, but they might stagnate on price for a little bit until we get Final Fantasy, and then we see where things shake out. Reprint equity. The Flame of Anor is just hard locked to Tolkien mythos, and as such, WotC will need to print it as the Universes Within card, and we haven't seen any announcements to do that with Lord of the Rings cards yet. So until we get that announcement, we're insulated. We're gold. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then from a buy quantity standpoint, I have my play set for Modern and then another like 2 on top of that I opened over time. And I would like to pick up another 6 more because generally you're either going to play these in multiples of 2. So expecting to out them 2 at a time or maybe 4 at a time if this gets even more popular is where you want to be. So if I can have 8 just floating around outside of my 4, that's perfectly fine for me. My average Modern player wouldn't play this card unless it was the meta deck to play, or it slided into Amulet Titan, because we all believe, and I think rightfully so, that is the best deck in Modern, but nobody knows how to play it perfectly yet. So until we figure that out, it is what it is.
I played Jund for too long to ever like that deck.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I played Tron, which was better Amulet, and then it was worse Amulet. So like, I feel you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this card's great. I've loved it since it was released, and I've thought it was for the Spellslinger deck just the best modal spell they could possibly have.
Yep.
Does everything.
Yeah. When I started playing Breach in Modern, we started with, I think, 2 in the board because we were copying lists. Then before I even sat down for a game, I put 1 in the main and 1 in the board. And I think by the time I started playing Breach competitively, I had both in the main because we were in a very breach-heavy era of Modern. It answered all the cards that you cared about in that deck, and then ancillarily, a lot of things in the decks that were coming up to attempt to beat Breach were answered by Flame of Anor because, again, it just destroys an artifact. Cool. Yeah. And 5 damage is a virtual Doomblade in Modern to anything that isn't literally Primeval Titan.
Yeah.
And then, if you just wanted to, as gravy, you draw 2 cards. It's like...
always good.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then you could breach it back later on. It was a fantastic card. Fantastic.
Yeah. 3 mana to kill a creature and draw 2 cards is just always insane.
Yeah. Well, now just imagine breaching it back in Commander, because you can still do that in that format, right? You're just going to, mow down the board and draw a bunch of cards at the same time to refuel. I mean, it doesn't seem great, but it's an option because people play Breach even in casual Commander, and that's a very, kind of casual thing to do. Take care of a couple problems on the board, draw a bunch of cards to refill, call it a day, pass the turn. Not the most friendly line of plays you could take, but for sure not the most egregious line of plays you could take under an Underworld Breach.
Oh, yeah, definitely not.
So, anything else for this week?
No, that should be it.
All right, so for at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, YouTube, Blue Sky, I am at Halt, I am Reptar, you are...
at Damon_Thurston.
We'll see you next week.